America is back on Trump's 80th birthday. He has one of the great events at the White House. He announces the next step in the resolution of the Iran deal. Then he hops on a plane and flies to France and has meetings all day. And the Europeans, by the way, most of them, are none too happy about all this success. Although, as they say in sports, winning cures everything, prosperity, everything. And he's bringing prosperity to the world. This is The Ordinary American. I'm your host, Paul Sarkis, anti-leftist show. We are fired up, even though it's Monday and not Fired Up Friday. That event last night was really something. It was, it's hard not to see that it was orchestrated in some way. 80th birthday, the Iran deal, the fight over to Europe. So we're going to get into it. All right. I want to play this first video because it was just, to me, it was, awesome. And I was trying to find something that showed the energy and the awesome without sort of playing the individual fights. All right. So let's press play on this.
I just got three things to say. God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engine.
Just awesome. Just awesome. Okay. Nobody's like Trump. Nobody could have done the Iran deal. Okay. Nobody is like Trump. Over the last, 3 or 4 days, I've been thinking of all of the things that have been going right, because I know we get super negative here a lot. Okay. Because there's a lot of negative stuff going on with the Save America Act and the traders and the theft of our tax dollars. But there's such a long list of awesome things too. And, in the course of all the negative, I want to try to do some of the awesome. So I was thinking to myself, we were told there was going to be World War III. There's no World War III. That's a good thing, right? That's a really good thing. No World War III. We were told there's going to be a forever war in Iran. No forever war. Boots on the ground. No boots on the ground. Gaza is now going to be a resort town. Who knew? Okay. We got the Abraham Accords. We got OPEC falling apart because America is drilling more oil than ever before, and we're becoming the biggest exporter in the world. Great. That's bringing freedom and security to the people, so they don't have to kowtow to some Iranian or Venezuelan dictator to get their oil. That goes for China too. All right. Taiwan's still free. China, Russia, Trump's getting along great with them. We are finding out that they don't have to be expansionary. We're finding out that Russia really wasn't interested in maybe going across Europe. That was all a scare tactic. What else? We got taxes down, not down enough. And I think we're going to find out more on this in the future. I think he's got some big plans for that. Productivity is way up. Manufacturing is starting to rise. We got trillions of dollars coming in, invested. Why? Because he told companies, big tariffs if you don't make your product here, no tariffs if you do make your product here. Guess what we still have? Trade and tariffs are working. We were told that would be the end of the world. By the way, we're going to go into it because we're going to play a little of the Professor St. Ange here in a second. But tariffs it's not instantaneous. It's not like tariff on day one, everybody raises their prices. Why not? Because the price gets absorbed along the supply chain, and then not every end user, every business wants to give up market share by raising prices when they think inflation will just be, not around for a long time. All right. I'm trying to think, well, we're waking up to the fact that it's commerce over conflict. I think I mentioned the Abraham Accords. There's so many good things happening. We got the UFC at the White House. How awesome was that? We got the World Cup here. Great. And I'm trying to think, there's so many more more things. So one of the things we try to do on here is we try to attack things from the ordinary American's perspective. We hate the experts. The experts suck. They've got everything wrong. Okay? They don't know what they're talking about. All us ordinary Americans, we have to make decisions all the time. The example I always give, which I just had to do over the weekend, is take my car to the shop. I'm not an expert. And if you saw that clip, I don't have it here, but of somebody, I think it was from Ford, basically saying the ordinary American shouldn't bother trying to fix their car. It's too complicated. That's on purpose. We used to be able to fix our cars. But I take my car into the shop. I'm not an expert. I got to figure out what they're telling me. Are they stealing from me? I don't know. But I got to figure it out, and I can do it. Same way I can figure out when my elected class people are talking to me. When I hear them telling me that we got to close down the playgrounds and the oceans and outdoor living during COVID, I can decipher that that's fraud. That is a lie. That's a manipulation. When I watch and I see that big box centers got to stay open, but mom and pop shops had to close. Churches couldn't open, but package stores and strip joints and casinos. No, I don't need the experts to tell me. I can see that that was fraud. So what Trump is doing is Trump is attacking these things from the ordinary American's point of view. And what we're seeing what it looks like when a president has no conflicts. We're reading now we're getting all the news. Hunter Biden was not only involved with the Burisma and natural gas, but he was also involved with some biolabs, China. There is no conflicts. Everybody can scream and yell and say Trump's, the TDS sufferers can scream and yell and say Trump's doing this, but they can't point anything. And all of these efforts that he does yield to our benefit, all to ordinary Americans' benefit. We're going to talk a bit about taxes here in a second. All right, and as you know, I love Promethean action. Smartest people out there, in my opinion. They really get it. There's at least 2 clips that I want to go over today. First, I want to use them because they have a couple of the J.D. Vance clips that I want to show. And then from there, we're going to get into some of their stuff. So let me see if I can get this on. All right.
George, again, this is a performance. Well, we already signed the deal digitally yesterday, and there's been no money released, and that won't change, George. Again, this is a performance-based thing. If we see the Iranians making, for example, taking action to eliminate their stockpile of enriched material, then yes, sanctions relief will follow. If we see the Iranians taking action to allow the kind of verification regime that we need to see to know that they're not going to build a nuclear weapon, yes, sanctions relief will follow. So this is really about walking down a pathway here where the Iranians will be welcomed into the world economy if they do the right thing. And George, we have to remember, their economy is fundamentally destroyed. Their nuclear program is fundamentally destroyed. If they don't do the right things, if they don't allow the verification regime, they're never going to have the money to rebuild their nuclear program to begin with. So this is fundamentally a win-win for the American people. What the president has said is he wants it to be a win for the Iranian people as well, but that requires some real trust building and some real positive conduct from the Iranian political system. We're going to see if that happens. If it does, they're absolutely going to find the president of the United States and the entire team a willing partner to make their country more prosperous.
All right.
As you know, sometimes with these agreements,
just want to stop there and two observations. One, he sort of is saying, there might be some hiccups between here and there. It's a pathway. Okay, we've all seen fits and starts. It's not going to go smooth. Okay, the Iranians can't be trusted. The great Ned tells us that all the time. I'm an ordinary American. I don't know any fancy people, but I have one great contact, good friend in the Middle East, in the oil and gas business, mining, etc. And he gets me great information from over there. And he said from the beginning, Iranians can't be trusted. They are mentally defective. They have been brainwashed for too long, and they can't operate essentially in the normal, peaceful world. Well, we're going to find out. There's rumors that the IRGC are killing each other now. I'm sure it's because the hardliners didn't want to give in, and the guys that wanted to live for another 30 days wanted to live. So they're fighting each other. Okay, but it's going to be a rocky road. But what we are going to start to see is massive investment particularly in Iran, but the entire Middle East is going to start to explode in a good way. Commerce over conflict. Why? Because you got the Abraham Accords, you got OPEC coming apart, which means each country is going to be dealing for themselves, free reign. Okay, Dubai started it, or the UAE started it, and now the others will follow. They will all the GCC countries are going to join the Abraham Accords. By the way, they've all been doing business with the Israelis for quite some time. It's just going to now be able to be above board. And with the 90 million people in Iran, they're going to definitely need to rebuild things. It's been nearly 50 years in a backward theocracy. So naturally, it's going to take some time to build it. But that country is going to explode in a positive way over the next 5 and 10 years. This is going to make the Middle East much more focused on commerce over conflict. All right, let's get back to JD.
There are some diplomatic protocols, some technical things to work out, but we plan to release the full text this week. We want the American people to see it, but we've also seen, of course, some misreporting about what's actually in the agreement. We've seen some accurate reporting about what's in the agreement. I think the most important thing for the American people to appreciate is that what this agreement does is really twofold. On the one hand, it ensures that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon while simultaneously opening the Strait of Hormuz. You already see oil prices from a high of $126 a barrel down to about $80 a barrel today. That's a lot of progress. But it also, Gail, fundamentally extends a hand to Iran and says, look, if you guys are willing to honor your obligations, if you're willing to allow real inspections of your nuclear program, then we will welcome you back into the world economy. I think what the president of the United States wants to do is turn over a leaf of 47 years of a failed relationship between the United States and Iran, but that requires the Iranians to actually honor their end of the bargain. So when people say that billions of dollars of assets will be released, that's not true. What is true is that Iran will have a much better and much more prosperous future if they meet the obligations they make in this agreement. We'll, of course, see. That's one of the things we're going to work out in the technical talks that will follow the official signing on Friday.
Okay, I'm gonna move on from that, and I'm just gonna try to cue this thing up for the next thing that I want to show. So, he's basically saying this. He is saying that it's a pathway. The Iranians have to perform. I suspect strongly that who's ever technically in charge right now may not be in charge 6 months from now. They may be dead. Not sure, but that's what I think. I think that unlike Venezuela, where Trump was willing to leave the current people, Delcy Rodriguez, in place, the number 2 for Maduro, for now, I suspect in Iran, once it starts to open up a little bit more and the citizens might get access to weapons and other things, you might see a change. I think it's important to reflect on the fact that the Iranians knew that the Straits of Hormuz was their sort of last effort to control that and put pressure on the United States. And because Trump was able to use our great armed forces to take out all of their defensive capabilities, they were losing the ability rapidly to control the Straits. And as we talked about last week, Trump got over 100 million barrels of oil out and onto the market. That's going to go up way more now, go back to normal probably, as Trump has said. That took away the Iranians' leverage. And without that leverage of the Straits, they don't have anything else. They're not having a nuclear weapon one way or another. They don't have any offensive capabilities. They have very little defensive capabilities, which means it was just a matter of time that we were going to eventually take over the Straits, or as Trump said, take over Karg Island and take over all of the oil infrastructure. So the Iranians, as I said last week, were the biggest dummies of all time. They should have taken a deal 6 months ago, a year and a half ago. What they wound up with here is most of them dead, all of the military infrastructure gone, and all of their money gone because big time Scotty Bessent, the most awesome Treasury Secretary of all time, has been snatching their crypto, snatching their villas and everything else. So what they wind up with? Nothing. They gain nothing by all this delay. Pretty stupid. Sets an example for the next group. What's the next group? Probably Cuba. By the way, we should have put that on the list. I suspect we'll all be vacationing in Cuba within 5 years because it will be awesome and opened up. Okay, the Western Hemisphere, controlled by the United States, Greenland, etc. At some point, it's either going to be Alberta or all of Canada will be moved into the US because they can't go on like they're going. All right, so Promethean Action did a special presentation. They usually do their pre-taped update. They did a live version. And one of the things I get from Promethean Action is this wide view of what's really been going on in the world and how we've been sort of living in a matrix where the City of London, the globalists, the elitists, what I would call the neocons and globalists, the elected class, they have been controlling the United States for a very long time. Let me just adjust that, sorry. They've been controlling the United States for a very long time, using our military to create conflicts, forever wars. They extract wealth. They keep people fighting. MI6, CIA working together. We've been over some of this stuff. I have a topic I would love to discuss with them, as I often say. My good friend Susan Kakinda and Barbara Boyd, who I don't even know, borrowing lines from the great movie Rocky II. I don't know them, but they're my good friends anyways because I learned so much from them. I would love to have a conversation with them where I can talk about the difference between the left and the right and how that factors into the things they're talking about. Well, Susan talked about it today. So I want to see if I can tee this up and we can play a little of this.
Finance capitalist system.
Yeah, that's got to get rewound.
Because it switched to another camera.
All right, here we go.
But people who get
so that it's hard to read, but it says, "Sorry, I wish Trump could reenact the Communist Control Act, since the left. I know you hate that, but those who identify as left in politics seem to be our number one threat." See, sort of asking the question, how do we define the left and how does that factor in to the world as you're describing it?
It's seduced into socialism, communism, and so on.
Good word.
It happens in an environment where you're given two binaries. One is this globalist finance capitalist system. And I hate the word capitalism because it can mean anything. It can mean George Soros, or it could mean Elon Musk. So it's a meaningless word. And what our founding fathers gave us instead was the American system of political economy, which you have not heard about for over 100 years. So you think my choice is the finance capitalists and the finance capitalist system of the globalists like George Soros, which screws everybody, or communism. Well, I suppose if I'm 19, I might be seduced into socialism, communism, and
okay, this is critical. She frames it so beautifully. The seduction, that is the seduction of the left, but she says that we've been tricked into thinking that it's one or the other, and it's capitalism or socialism. And I am certainly guilty of that. I don't get seduced by leftism, I get seduced by capitalism. But she's saying, and she's going to go on here, that it's different, that it's the American system of the political economy. And that talks about manufacturing, being able to make things. We have to be able to make things, with our hands, manufacture them, even if they're going to be robots at some point. But certainly the important things like medicine, food, technology, the critical elements that go into those things, rare earth minerals and other things, we have to have all that stuff that we can control, not rely on China, not rely on, as they inflate our dollars purchasing power away in Washington, placate us by saying we'll get China to make that stuff cheaper. It's a bad trade. We need to make it here. This is what she's talking about. So yes, leftism sucks. She's talking about it and she'll say this, but she's saying that it's not just communism or capitalism. It's the American system that we have to get back to.
So on. Because the actual solution to the crisis is what Donald Trump and his team are doing. The restoration of the American system of political economy, which says you do not measure economic progress from the standpoint of how much money you accumulate. Money is still a means of exchange. The profit motive plays a certain role in terms of how you shape your society and so on. but it's subsidiary to the question of, is your society advancing physically, morally, technologically? That's the American.
I would add spiritually. I would actually put spiritually on the top, because the left can't operate in a country that has a relationship with God.
System. So the American system says we're going to measure progress from the standpoint, are we producing more? Are people more productive? Are they more culturally uplifted? Are they happier? And we're going to create the kind of system where that is benefited, where you say, all right, if you're going to do something like that, then you're going to get the right tax breaks. We're going to make sure you have adequate.
This is carrots and sticks.
Investment. We're going to protect you in the United States with tariffs, versus the people who simply want to financially speculate and then stupefy the population to keep them happy with that, with gambling, drugs, stupid entertainment, and so on. So the restoration of the knowledge of the American system is going to be the most powerful antidote against communism and socialism.
Okay, brilliant way of putting it and phrasing it, and starting off by saying that some people get seduced by leftism. It's this notion that everything's going to be fair. I've shared before, a great guy, Dr. Ray Tabibiazar, he wrote a book about his Jewish family's escape from Iran post-revolution. The dad was a doctor and was helping everyone, including the regime people. But in the book, you'll read about it. There's a problem, and the message come down. He's got to go. He's got to escape. Why do I bring that up? I bring that up because when people fall for this notion of everything's going to be equal, our brains are susceptible to this. We want everything to be equal. Most of us don't want conflict. We want, everything to be fair. Certainly, I want it to be fair for me. But we're humans, and we are sinners, and we are all broken. And so we make our own mistakes. And when you multiply that by 8 billion people on the earth, there's a lot of mistakes. But in Iran, prior to the revolution where the MI6 and CIA installed the Ayatollah, which is exactly what happened, the population was seduced and said, well, the Shah sucks, he's bad. Why? He wasn't really that. He did some terrible things. But overall, why he was removed by the CIA and MI6 was because he was off the reservation and he was doing things for the Iranian people. But the Iranian people got tricked, and they got tricked into being seduced by the left. And even Dr. Tabibiazar's mom, who's an extremely smart woman, she got seduced and said, she's a Jewish woman who got seduced by a Muslim leftist. Yeah, I want equality. Well, it never goes well. Leftism never works, ever, anywhere. It cannot, because it's based on oppressor versus oppressed. So it means it sets up this notion that, I got to jump on top, and it's always this way. And what ends up happening is the people at the top get all the riches. Everywhere, always. We even see it in America. Black Lives Matter. Those executives didn't spread the money around to help defeat racism. They bought mansions and stole the money for themselves. Leftism doesn't work, but it seduces us. This is what she's talking about. It seduces us and says, oh, maybe we can have equality. We can't have equality. That's not real. That's not a thing. We can have equality of opportunity, which the American system brings. And now for somebody like me, free market guy, Milton Friedman, Austrian economics, etc., we get tricked into thinking that free trade, say, or the traditional capitalist points of view of just, essentially make everything open is great. But if one country, a big one like China, decides, well, we're going to distort the market, how are they going to distort the market? Well, for starters, they're going to say, well, we want to mess up the steel business. How do we do it? We're going to go to our steel producers and tell them, take the price of steel down 50% from where it is. The company says, well, how will we do that? The government says, don't worry, I'll subsidize you. So now the American companies who don't have a government subsidizing them can't compete. And then we're tricked, we're seduced into saying, free trade, free trade. Well, that's not free trade. That's not free trade at all. Free trade is coming with the tariffs. Yes, we're all going to have to play by the same rules. That's what the American system says. Tariffs. Let's go back also. The American system does not have taxes on citizens, not at the federal government level. Our ancestors fell for it. They got seduced for the 16th Amendment in 1913. Why? Same story. It'll be more fair. Only the rich people will have to pay. Oh, good. I'll get some extra money from the rich people. Roll the film forward. What happens? They broke us into jail. Just like I say, voting Democrat is like breaking into jail. Our ancestors voted for essentially Democrat leftist policies and broke us into jail. Now look at the tax situation. Not only do we get taxed too much, because anything more than zero is too much at the federal level, but they steal our money and they give it not only to themselves to enrich themselves, not only to illegal aliens, but also to enemies of America, both domestic and foreign. So we are paying for our own country to be destroyed. This is unbelievable, and we're still falling for it. All right, I want to transition. There's so much more in that video, but I want to transition just for a second if I can. Where is it? Here we go. This gets to taxes. I want to mention this because this is how the seduction works. This is a chart. I think I've probably even shown this before. Okay. This is a chart that shows, I'm going to blow that up a little bit if I can. I'm not going to be able to. Oh, there it is. Maybe that's a little bit better. This is a chart that shows the different tax brackets, top 1%, top 2 to 5%, et cetera, down to the bottom 50%. The top line, share of all income earned. How much of the income does that category make? The top 1% makes 26% of all the income. By the way, that's a whole other topic that I have a lot to say on. Why does the top 1% make 26% of the income? We'll come back to that. But look what they pay. Share of all income taxes paid. They're carrying 46% of the burden. Okay? So they're paying way more than they earn as a percentage. Now you'll notice every other one of these categories, the numbers go the opposite way. What do I mean by that? Well, this is the best visual. The bottom 10%, the bottom 50% earns 10% of the income, but they only pay 2% of the taxes. That could be translated into not carrying their weight. So when the left wants to seduce you and say the rich don't pay their fair share, they most certainly do pay their fair share. They most certainly do. This whole chart is a trick. Even me discussing it is part of the trick. What's the trick? The trick is to assume or believe that taxes should be applied. They should not be. At the federal level, there should be no taxes. If there were no taxes on anybody, this entire chart goes away. And now what we have is a government that will have to live off of tariffs and other fees that they can get. It will shrink. That's good. Trump's been shrinking it. We talk about it all the time. I think he's shrunk it by 300,000 employees, over 10%, I believe. Good. We need it more. Why? Because we are the best stewards for our tax dollars. We will spend it more efficiently. All right. I want to transition now to the great Professor St. Ange. Let me see if I can get this up. Hold on one second. He did a piece this he does a daily video. Usually it's about 3 minutes long. That's not it. That's not it. Wait a second. Cancel. Go back. Go back. My 10 producers and huge staff are still on vacation, shockingly. All right. So here we go. There we go. He's talking about inflation. We're going to play the whole thing, but we're going to do a little film study here.
Annualized. Left-wing media positively crooned the Daily Beast wrote, quote, Trump humiliated as inflation rockets to a new high. Now, the good news is inflation's down from an annualized 8% the previous month and 11% in March, the first month of the war. The bad news is this now takes us to 4.2% on the year, the highest inflation since we escaped the clutches of Biden. The kicker is the entire inflation story is energy, which has come down from 111 in March, but is still grinding along at 90.
I think he filmed this before the Iran deal. I think. Because if it's mostly energy, he's going to say this in a second, that's mostly because of the prices going up during the Iran conflict. Now they're coming back down.
Bucks a barrel compared to 65 on the eve of the war and 57 in the halcyon days of last December when you could run the aircon and the car radio. But inflation is not spreading outside energy. So groceries last month rose a satisfying 0.1%. Everything else outside food and energy, so-called non-core inflation, was at 0.2, which is a smidge above the Fed's 2% target. So why aren't prices rising everywhere else? Because unlike the crayon eaters at Daily Beast, companies understand that inflation is temporary from energy, and companies don't raise prices for temporary inflation because they lose market share. Unfortunately, there's one outfit that is stuck with the Daily Beast coloring book, and that is the Federal Reserve.
Federal Reserve, by the way, another thing we should get rid of. We talk a lot about this. 1913 was a terrible year. 16th Amendment, income tax. 17th Amendment, popular election of the senators. Federal Reserve was created. It was created to allow printing of money, and it was a dark deal between a bunch of banks that said to the government, you give us the right to print money, and we'll let you have this sort of oversight over it. Okay? Terrible. He's not going to get into the history, but he's going to get into the money printing here.
Since the war started, I've said the war itself and even $100 oil will not cause a recession. What will is a Fed that panics and hikes rates. Now, the Fed does this because oil inflation goes on top of the regular inflation they steal through money printing to take from the poor and give to the rich.
We talked about that the other day. They steal our money, taxes. There should be none, but they steal it. They don't tell us that they're giving it to illegals and using it to fund leftism and Democrats who are destroying America. And then they print more money, which inflates away the value of our dollars that we do have left. So it's harder for us to survive. They take our money, they give it to people who are hurting us. They inflate our purchasing power away, so we have to work even harder. What they don't tell us is that all the money that they're giving to illegals, those illegals are coming into the market, jacking up all of our prices, which makes it even harder.
Put oil on top of the regular siphon and it gets awkward. Unfortunately, hikes crush the economy and jobs since they raise borrowing costs, which cuts investment and bankrupts employers. You get leftover goods and leftover workers, so both get cheap. Now, you could reduce inflation by lowering money printing, so-called quantitative tightening, but instead the Fed hikes to crush jobs. The tragedy is even with $90 oil, the Fed does not need to feed workers into a wood chipper. Recent videos have argued you could drop prices economy-wide by 20% with policy reforms in housing, healthcare, insurance, and yes, energy. In housing, simpler.
Okay, what he's saying there is what Trump is doing. Trump has the policy, can't remember the exact numbers. It's like for every one regulation that gets put in place, 10 have to be removed. We don't need government as such a big person or thing in our world. Increasing the cost of everything. He's going to talk about housing here in a second. Increasing the cost of everything. Education, food, everything, clothing.
Zoning and environmental rules could cut prices by nearly 100,000, according to the National Association of Realtors. Lower deficits could lower mortgage costs. In healthcare and insurance, requiring price transparency, cracking down on so-called charge master abuse, $80 for a Tylenol, and certificate of need and scope of practice rules hospitals use to cartelize, let patients buy insurance cross-state. And then energy, where Trump's done a lot to free up permits and drilling, which are up 55% on the year. But it needs a congressional blitz to clear decades of weaponization of environmental laws and permits that keep millions of barrels in the ground. So as said, it's brought to you by The Bitcoin Way. Everybody knows inflation's temporary, except the Daily Beast and the Federal Reserve. If the Fed can control itself, oil will continue bouncing off the economy. And if Congress can bestir itself to cut some red tape, we could get some good out of 4.2 inflation. Unfortunately, Democrats on the Fed and Congress will do their best to screw it up. Listen.
All right. By the way, I don't think the Fed is going to raise rates. We'll see. Kevin Warsh, I think, has his first meeting today. He's the new Fed chairman. I doubt the Fed will raise rates. If they do, it's going to be a problem. And I think there'll be a pretty severe political backlash. Although, as we know, the elected class never seems to have to pay for their mistakes. Okay, so what the great Professor St. Onge is saying is, yes, inflation is a little high, but it's all in energy, and that we can start to bring it down dramatically when we do things like make government smaller, get them out of our business as much as possible, more and more and more. And we have some of the tools. We're producing tons of energy now. That will start to really become a big deal. We're down at 80. He gave great metrics. Look for $65 a barrel. That was pre-Iran conflict numbers. Or go back to December and he pointed out 57. I think you should be looking for, within a year, something in the low 50s or even the high 40s per barrel. I think that's, something that we can realistically expect. Go back to what he was saying. We have to get rid of the size and scope of government. He actually put a lot in there on the health insurance side, which we're not going to get into because that's a topic unto itself. But he also talked about Congress. Our biggest problem right now is that we don't have free and fair elections, which means we have a very difficult time as ordinary Americans, as voters, changing the system. The way the founders gave it to us, we're supposed to vote out the idiots and vote in new idiots who can kind of hopefully fix things. But our remedy for poor government is to vote out. We can't do that when the elections are corrupted. The Save America Act won't fix everything, but it will go a long way. Some states are starting to do it. California's got a ballot question to do it. We know about their corrupted elections. Arizona's got a ballot question. They were having corrupted elections in 2020. I want to put this up. This is Trump's. Trump put out a Truth Social. Hold on, where is it? There it is. And he now is he's going back at it. Well, that's not what I want. That's what I want. We're going to see if it works. I think it will. Let me try to blow this up, or I can read it without my glasses. The Democrats want FISA because that's what they use to go after me. 3 years during my first term, I'm against FISA if it doesn't come with the Save America Act. Full version, exclamation point, firmly attached to it. Make America great again. And then he goes through, all voters must show photo ID. All voters must show proof of citizenship. No mail-in ballots except for illness, disability, military, or travel. No men and women's sports. No transgender mutilation surgery for our children. Thanks for your attention to this matter. Okay, he's now tying it to the FISA, which the elected class wants. Why? Because they want to control us, and they do it by spying on us. That's oversimplified, but that's how it breaks down. Okay? There is nobody like Trump. I don't know how the whole thing's going to pan out. Obviously, I don't have a crystal ball. But I will tell you, betting against Trump, I say this a lot, betting against Trump has been a near guaranteed loser for quite a long time. Near guaranteed loser. I would not bet against him. Now, I'm going to finish up here. I want to play not the whole thing, but this one. Let's see if I can find it. The great Michael Knowles. He put out like a 4 or 5 minute video. So I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I am going to play. By the way, I highly recommend you go watch the whole thing. I'm going to play just a few moments of it. This is about how and why our elections have been corrupted. And he goes through and shows this isn't new. The Democrats have been doing this forever. Why? We say all the time, if the Democrats didn't steal our elections and steal our money, there would be a 20% party. That's largely been true since inception. The Democrats were the party of slavery. Most of the country, certainly the North, were not in favor of slavery. Most of the founding fathers wanted to get rid of slavery. Washington, Jefferson, and they tried. Okay, it didn't work. They put in mechanisms for us to remove it later. It resulted in a civil war. I think that they were even surprised at how long it got to last. And if they were still alive now, certainly, I think they'd say that that was something that they didn't count on. But they had to prioritize getting the country together first, which unfortunately turns out to be true. It worked. So this is a video about that, just the tail end of it, where you can hear him talk about how long this has been going on. By the way, how great is that animation?
Increase absentee ballots and insecure ballot drop boxes, in some cases, such as Pennsylvania, in violation of the state constitution. Despite claims of perfectly secure elections, hundreds of Democrats over American history have been convicted over election fraud, and those convictions represent only a small percentage of cases, which represent only a small percentage of allegations of voter fraud widely acknowledged by historians and really by anyone with eyes.
Anyone with eyes. So when they say it's not happening, it's been happening for decades, for a century more. It's been happening, and it's still happening. It's still happening today.
In Los Angeles, we see the same old story. A Republican defeated by the last-minute count of absentee ballots, cast without any solid chain of custody, often in ballot drop boxes without any election security. Those circumstances might all be perfectly legal, at least in a Democrat stronghold such as Gomorrah by the Sea. But we're still left with a simple question. If Democrats want us to believe there isn't any voter fraud, why do they keep expanding the use of all the same tricks they've used to steal elections for the past 200 years?
That's the piece that's most important. That gets to the Save America Act. If there's no voter fraud going on, then what would be the big deal for people to show ID? They use the stupid racism stuff the Democrats have been using forever. Oh, you're a racist. Ooh, I'm afraid. Even Tim Walz, by the way, in Minnesota, we find out that they knew that our money was being stolen and given to the Somalis, but they were afraid to be called a racist. They were afraid to be called a racist. This is like the boy who cried wolf, though, because now they've done it so often, it doesn't mean anything. Why? Because they're lying, because they're the racists. Okay, the soft bigotry of low expectations. Okay, so what Michael Knowles, by the way, love his sense of humor. Dry as a bone, Gomorrah by the Sea for LA. Awesome. What is he saying? He's saying if they don't have a problem with safe and fair elections and don't think that voter fraud is going on, then what's the big deal? Why not just secure it up tight? Oh, because we don't want people to not be able to vote. Hillary Clinton came out chirping, about this. You can tell when we're making progress because she comes out. 94% of Black voting age Americans have a license. That is an ID. Okay? The other 6%, we can get them. We can take care of them. 94%. I think it's 96% of white Americans. So it's not like it's 100 for other people. Okay? Watch that video. Michael Knowles goes through and shows you all the corruption that's always been happening. What he doesn't show, because there isn't a big track record of it, is mass Republican election fraud. Why? Because it doesn't really happen. It doesn't really happen. Why? Because the country has always been and is now more of a center-right country than it is left. So we haven't had to. We also have things in place like a belief in God. You're much more likely to be religious if you're on the right than you are on the left. And a belief in God is a belief that there is somebody watching. I can certainly be forgiven. We do this a lot on Forgiveness Friday. I highly recommend you tune in. Forgiveness Friday. It's awesome. But we can be forgiven, but we have guardrails on. We believe in a higher power. We believe in him watching us, and we believe that we are here for something bigger. Like Susan Kakinda said, it's not just about how much money you can make. The political translation of what Susan Kakinda said is what James Carville says. Power is the only moral imperative. That's what he says. Doesn't matter if you don't have power because you can't do anything. So it's the only moral imperative. Susan Kakinda is saying the opposite of that. A society needs to be judged by what they make, what they do, the advancements, the spiritual advancements, the pursuit of happiness advancements. The left doesn't care. They just want power, oppressed and oppressor. Highly recommend go watch that Michael Knowles video. All right, that's Monday. I can't actually wait to get off and see if Trump's put out anything. Go watch some of those videos from the UFC and tell me you don't feel like America's awesome and you feel pride in being American. It was great. We'll talk maybe tomorrow about how the left has convinced too many people that America sucks. If you are that person, if you feel America sucks, this is the show for you. Stick around. This is the antidote. Go buy yourself a MAGA hat, stick it on, and press play here. Monday through Friday, 2 p.m., Rumble and YouTube. Like, subscribe, and follow. That helps get the word out, helps increase our viewership. Please go and look at that Michael Knowles video about Promethean Action. Just brilliant stuff. All right, we're going to see you here tomorrow, 2 p.m. The great Father Mike Schmitz told me he's praying for me and asked me to pray for him. I will. I'll pray for you. I'm rooting for you. Please root for me.